The Master and Margarita is one of the well-known books of the 20th century, a masterpiece of Russian literature, a work of great renown, globally translated into many languages, and it sold over 100 million copies. But how is it that this book came to be so deeply ingrained in the Russian culture? How is it that it came to have a place on every Russian reader's shelf? What is it even about to merit such popularity? Well,
one hot spring evening, just as the sun was going down, two men appeared at Patriarch's Ponds. They're not just any men, they're a poet and a critic, and they're about to be joined by the devil. That's right, the devil, the central character of the novel.
This mysterious, tall, dark, and handsome stranger with different colored eyes and, oh Christ, suddenly is turning into a romance novel. And that is because it is, of course, essentially a romance novel. It's been called many things. It's been called a political satire, magical realism, historical fiction, and of course Bulgakov's wit and writing does bring that special bit of something, that little bit of extra humor to an otherwise dark subject, but it is also essentially a romance novel, and a beautiful one at that. I was perhaps wrong to say, oh Christ, at the beginning, because yes, it is a romance novel, but there is no room for Christ here, because the story starts with the devil, Woland. Woland, the Germanic name for Satan.
Woland engages the poet and the critic in a conversation about religion. The astute reader will also see the interspersed allusions to Bulgakov's own reality and the corruption of the Soviet Union within the book from the onset. Woland is delighted that the two men are atheists. He introduces himself as a professor of black magic and makes predictions that one of the men, because of some spilled oil and a Russian woman, will have his head cut off.
Cheery, right? So he goes off, and as he goes off to report him to the authorities, he trips on some oil that a Russian woman called Anushka spilled, and he falls onto the tracks, and a tram rides over him, and his head is indeed cut off. A freak accident, right? Except a freak accident that was predetermined by Woland. And now, of course, this raises questions. Was it Woland who made sure that he died? Was it Woland who somehow made Anushka drop this oil? Was it the cowardice to report another human being to the authorities, to let them be led to a certain death? Regardless of what you think, there are strange powers at work here. There's a strange and inexplicable force, and Woland, the devil, is at the center of it. And as the book progresses, we will see just where his magic and his dark powers will lead us.
Woland and his entourage begin to use their magic powers. A man disappears, another goes mad. They leave a path of confusion and destruction in their wake, but they never seem to do it maliciously. Instead, Woland merely draws out the worst in people. He holds up a mirror to society and lets us wither with horror at the sight that we see. He's just there to balance things out. For every bit of good, there's a bit of evil. The story shifts between the setting of Soviet Moscow with its censorship and greed and self-interest and eyes everywhere, and how Woland shows all this with the magical unveilings, and the story of Pontius Pilate as he's sentencing Jesus to his death.
It's a fantastical, as metaphorical blend of absurdity. In a straightforward Bulgakov way, we are told what should be an absolutely normal scene, but that is somehow inverted, stretched to the point of insanity. And this is insanity, of course, this entire novel. The realities of Soviet life, queuing for groceries, and at the same time a naked woman flying on a broom. It is insanity, there's no other word for it. But it's insanity in the reality that Bulgakov was living in. And it would have been an impossibility for him to publish it when this is so clearly a parody of their world, when it is set in the presence. Under the Soviet censorship, that would be signing a death warrant to even dare to submit this manuscript. Publish this under the USSR? I mean, Bulgakov isn't popular already. He is not allowed to work anywhere, essentially. He's on the blacklist. He can't be hired. He's so poor that he doesn't have the money for ink. He's writing with pencil on some of his novels. Novels that he continues to write in a fit of courage, in a fit of foolishness. He continues to write as he receives more and more hate. The hate is piled on top of him. He receives more than 200 evil reviews. He's constantly hated on. His works are called a cheap banality. I mean, he's persecuted everywhere he goes. Let us digress from the plot of Master and Margarita for a second, and let's take a look at Bulgakov's life and what he was facing at the time. For this video, I went to Bulgakov's flat, to Большая Садовая 302 bis, to the Нехорошая квартира, to the evil apartments, to the evil little flat where Bulgakov lived and where he wrote this novel. Bulgakov described the flat as a nightmare where the rooms are horrible and the neighbors too. He wrote about this building multiple times and about the terrible living conditions, and honestly, Bulgakov's communal flat was not that bad compared to some of the living conditions that other people had during the Soviet Union, but of course Bulgakov didn't want to live here. Their families sharing a home that was never supposed to be shared. Bulgakov wrote to his sister, "In the block live our brothers in evil, the organized proletariat, and our facilities are really lousy, nothing works." Is it any wonder that he included this in his book? Actually, not only in the Master and Margarita, in several works, this apartment features as the place of evil. Is it any wonder that Valand and his troupe set up base here? Throughout the duration of this book, they live in this apartment. Bulgakov personally wishes for the devil to live there, because the devil deserves to live there. Because the state of this apartment, for Bulgakov, this was always a place of horror, and so this is reflected very much in his novels. It's not called the evil apartment for nothing. However, today, this house is a site of pilgrimage to all Bulgakov fans. When you walk up the stairs to his apartment that has been turned into a lovely museum, to see where he wrote, to see where he played the piano, to see where he hung out in the communal kitchen with his lovely wife, you see a row of graffiti dedicated to the book, devoted to the book. This house has fought many battles to stay, to be turned into a museum. A lot of people don't like this book for religious reasons, no aesthetic reasons, and this house fought to stay. It might be an evil apartment, but it's the evil apartment where Bulgakov fans congregate.
The more Bulgakov wrote, the worse things got. It's always tough for a writer to have their entire work changed to suit the tastes of the government, so in an act of foolishness and courage and desperation, he wrote a telegram to the tyrant.
That could have gotten both Bulgakov and his wife shot. And having the nerve to ask to leave, to admit that you don't like it here, already dealing with hate, and this is what you're saying to people who love the government or who have no choice other than to love the government? This just shows exactly how desperate measures desperate times call for. So Bulgakov sent the telegram. And then the next day, the phone rang. And Bulgakov regretted that decision his entire life. And it's important to say it here, it's relevant, because the Master and Margarita is very much also a denunciation of cowardice. Cowardice that the Soviet Union in some regards promoted. And Bulgakov's experiences very much shaped the novel. His personal life, his feelings, his emotions.
In the second part of the novel, we are introduced to the two characters the novel is named after, Master and Margarita. Master is what Margarita calls the man she loves. Although she's married to some random bureaucrat, she loves only one man, Master, an author who has spent years working on a novel. Observe the parallels between Master and Bulgakov as you read, but in your curiosity, do not forget the queen of today's show, Margarita. The critics reject Master's work, his life's culmination, and Master cannot bear it. He burns the manuscript and he flees, and Margarita, through her love and her devotion, asks for Roland to help and embarks on a mystical journey to help find her true love. Read the novel yourself to find out what goes on from there.
Master and Margarita is an unforgettable work, and to see it uncensored is to be presented with Bulgakov's literary gift. And this is truly a book, like I said, for every type of reader. For the historic lover, for the romantic, for readers who want to see this literary gift that Bulgakov possesses, to see his brilliant writing, to be transported into a different world. It's a book that has truly brought a lot. to the Russian culture. And to Moscow, for example, it has, we see many allusions as we walk the streets of Moscow, from the famous sign saying, "Don't talk to strangers," to just different statues dedicated to Bulgakov. And it's a book that has also contributed a lot to the Russian language. One of the phrases that everyone knows in Russian, along with Anushka has already spilled the oil, is that manuscripts don't burn. Bulgakov almost burned Master and Margarita, but the work was saved, and somehow it was published 33 years later through the efforts of his wife, who has promised to him on his deathbed that she would get it published, and she continued, no matter what obstacles life threw at her, she continued to get this book published and out into this world, a great literary gift. And 33 is of course a very significant number, the age when Jesus died. And this book was published 33 years later, and I think it's symbolical, because just when Jesus died, Poland came to town, and we were presented with this great literary masterpiece. Although Bulgakov never lived to see his work published, and he lived his entire life with the feeling that everyone hates him, that he shouldn't be here, and that it was his own fault that he had to stay there, I hope that he would be happy seeing the impact that his work had on the lives and on the hearts of people all around the world. I want to urge you to go and read this fantastical work, because I genuinely don't think that you will regret it. And if you have the time, and if you have the opportunity, and if you're thirsty for more, I would also like to recommend Canaan's Heart, about a dog who turns into a human. And I would also like to recommend Notes of a Young Doctor, to read about Bulgakov's first-hand experience saving lives. Thank you.